Welcome to Dominate Your Day podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who want to make a difference in the workplace. We believe each person is unique and has a purpose they can live out every day and make an impact in the world. Here at Dominate Your Day podcast, we hear stories from leaders who have used their unique talents to transform themselves and their companies from the inside out.
Welcome back to Dominate Your Day. We're continuing our great discussion with leadership expert Bob Tiede. We had such a great session that we divided up into two segments. In the first part of our conversation, Bob shared his unique perspective on leadership and the power of asking the right questions, and his insights he drew from over 40 years of experience and articulated in his acclaimed book, Leading with Questions. And it's already given me so much to think about that I wanted to start this second part, which we will be delving deeper into Bob's philosophy. We'll explore practical ways leaders can implement his approach in their day-to-day operations, and we'll also discuss some of the challenges they might face and then how to overcome them with questions. So Bob's unconventional approach has transformed leadership paradigms across various fields. So this next part promises to be just as enlightening, giving you actionable strategies looking to drive your team performance and engagement through effective questioning. So we are excited to welcome you as we dive right back in. So please join me once again in welcoming Bob Tiede. When we talk about questions, and I love asking the question each week with my team, do you have what you need? Are you clear about what we've got? Is there anything you need from me? And I think just asking those are the top three in the Q12, which is the Gallup survey for engagement. Just asking those three every week, I think is powerful. But what I'd love to talk about now is how can you teach someone to lead with questions? And I understand you have a little way that you can do that in like 30 seconds. So let's talk about that.
I do. Whenever I speak, I say, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds? And Dana, every hand goes up.
I bet.
And I share that, whenever I speak, I get a sense from the audience that they'd like to learn to lead with questions. But many of them imagine it'll require getting a master's degree in questionology. It's like, Dana, wouldn't it be nice to be a brain surgeon and make hundreds of thousands of dollars every year? Yeah, but how likely is it that we will actually be able to go through all the education required to be a brain surgeon? Not very likely. And so, again, if a leader pictures that learning to lead with questions will require this massive educational effort, it's like, yeah, nice idea, but I'm never going to get there. And so when I say, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds, every hand goes up. And then, Dana, I always call one member of the audience up. Today, I'm going to call you up, Dana. You're the audience.
Fun. Okay.
And as they come up, I always say, the reason I picked Dana or whoever I'm calling up is because I sense she has a photographic memory. She's only going to have to hear my 4 favorite questions once, and she'll have them memorized. And the person I bring up always is a little nervous or they're shaking their head. No, I don't have a photographic memory.
Correct.
And I say, I actually think you do. Just trust me here. And I say, I've got a second hand on my watch, so I'll keep the time. And Dana, the clock is going to start when I say my first favorite question. I'll share all 4. And then I'm going to ask, do you have them memorized? And you'll say yes, because you will. And then I'll say, share them. And upon you sharing the 4th question, when you're done with the 4th, the clock stops. So you ready to give this a try?
Sure.
Here we go. Okay, Dana, my first favorite question is, what do you think? Second, what else? Third, what else? Fourth, what else? Do you have them memorized?
Absolutely.
Share them with us.
What do you think? What else? What else? What else?
Oh, my goodness. Dana, I'm going to have to change this to who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 18 seconds?
There you go.
Now, Dana, I know that as I share this I see in the audience some skepticism. So probably the viewers of this podcast, there's a little skepticism out there saying, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I said, well, of course not in that rapid fashion. But imagine a conversation. Mm-hmm. And of course, what do you think? We're going to add a topic to that. Hey, Dana, what do you think we might do about? There'll be some issue topic. And I find that when you ask somebody, hey, what do you think about? They will give you an answer. Mm-hmm. And at some point, though, they'll pause. And even when I did ask people questions, asked the question, they gave an answer, they paused, I moved on. I didn't understand that something we all do instinctively when we're asked to give input is we roll out a safe answer to see how it's treated. And we do that instinctively. And so, Dana, if I asked you, hey, what do you think about? And you give me that first answer, and I said, well, Dana, that's dumb. Everyone knows that. You're sorry you answered. Mm-hmm. Kind of your fear came true. Yeah, my answer isn't going to be respected. But when I say, wow, Dana, that's really good. Well, what else? Well, you kind of relax and think, wow, Bob appreciates what I'm sharing, and you'll give me more. And then you'll pause again at some point, and instead of moving on, I'm likely to grab a pen and say, Dana, this is gold. I've got to take notes here. Please continue. Say more about this. And at this point, you're thinking, well, Bob's smarter than I thought he was. He loves what I'm sharing, and you'll give me more. What I've discovered, it's actually on the third and fourth question that you get to their gold nugget, their very best thought. And once I begin to understand this, you know, we've all heard the story of that proverbial gold miner, the guy who mined for gold all his life looking for the gold vein. Mm-hmm. He finally quits. And somebody came along later and discovered the old miner was within 6 inches of the gold vein. Yeah. Well, if you only ask somebody, hey, what do you think about? And you get their first answer and then you move on, you're like that gold miner. You got close, but it's the what else is. Hey, say more about that. This is really good. Please continue. That gets you to their gold nugget, their very best thought. And then remember, Dana, the promise, going back to, I asked who would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds. With just these 4 questions. And Dana, this is what I love about leading with questions, is so many of the best questions are so simple. They're not complicated, long, drawn out kind of questions. But imagine, again, that person, that leader who's only led by telling, but now hears this and says, okay, let me give this a try. In their next meeting, one-on-one with a staff member or with their team around their conference table, whatever the issue is, just say, hey, gang, what do you think we ought to do about this? Mm-hmm. And then after you hear that first answer, wow, that's good. Say more about that. What else? Mm-hmm. They hear another answer. Instead of moving on, wow, hey, let me take notes. This is so good. What else? Just with these 4 questions, they will have moved from leading by telling to leading with questions, just with these 4. And, you know, there's some more that I love to use, but they're all simple.
And I think that's the key. I think people make it too complicated, and we think we have to be filling the space with words, right? Especially those that have high communicator and they want to talk a lot, right? So what is your key? And we've got just a few minutes left, but what is your key for helping people give them that space when they feel like they need to talk? When they feel like they need to say something?
Here's one of my favorites. It's the 8-second rule. Now, when you think of 8 seconds, is there any sport that comes to mind that has an 8-second clock?
Well, I'm not, I don't know. I'm not a big sports person.
As soon as I mention it, bull riding.
Oh, well, there we go. There we go.
The bull rider, to have a qualified ride, has to stay on the bull for 8 seconds. Now, you don't have to be a fan, but if you've ever just, you know, clicking channels and you come across bull riding, you realize, wait a minute, these bull riders, and we're talking professional bull riders, not you or I, Dana, getting on a bull. We're actually too smart to do that. But 80% of them are knocked off in less than 8 seconds. You see, to a bull rider, 8 seconds is an eternity. We think of it being just like, nothing. But here's what's fascinating. You could say, okay, why did you go there, Bob? What's that have to do with the question? To give them space. Research shows that the average person, when they ask a question, only waits 2 or 3 seconds for an answer. If the person doesn't answer in 2 or 3 seconds, that silence seems like an eternity. And we feel like we got to fill that silence. And so we'll either re-ask the question, answer the question ourselves, or just move on in the conversation with no self-awareness of what we've just done. And so I say to people, 8-second rule. Ask your question. Keep comfortable eyesight, but relax. Don't have intense eyesight. Just relax and count to yourself. 1001, 1002. Not out loud, but silently. Dana, there's times I've gotten to 1030. The longer the silence, the better the answer. And now, of course, it depends on the question. I mean, if I was in your office and, hey, which way to the men's room, you're going to answer that instantly. But if I said, Dana, I've got a question for you, what would you say has been one of your greatest failures that actually has ended up leading to one of your greatest successes? Well, if you've never been asked that question before, how helpful will it be if after 2 or 3 seconds, I ask another question or I begin to talk? No, I've got to give you space to think. And if I'll give you that space, I could well be the beneficiary of some incredible wisdom. But I've got to give you the space. Count silently, relax. Here's the good news. They will answer. And the longer the silence, the better the answer. Now, a few of your listeners, viewers today are going to hate me for the 8-second rule. Here's why. Up to now, they've been part of that group that's been in oblivion. Didn't realize what they were doing. But later today, they're going to ask a question of somebody, and when they don't answer in 2 or 3 seconds, they're going to start talking, and then they're going to remember the 8-second rule, and they're going to say, darn that TD. It still happens to me. So here's what I do when I violate the 8-second rule. Time out. Wait a minute. My bad. I asked you a question. I didn't even give you time to think, and I started talking again. My apology. Here's the question. And this time I'm going to remain silent. You take all the time you need to answer. And I wish I could say that never happens to me, but from time to time, I still have to use the apologize and give them time. But it works. Nobody has ever said, oh, that really offends me, Bob. They appreciate the confession and then the privilege of having the time.
And I think, Bob, it's a great metaphor when you think about that first question of what do you think about? And then what else? Giving you that gold digger metaphor is I'm close. If I leave right now, I'm not going to get it. And then thinking about giving them the space with the bull riding, the 8-second rule. And, I've heard all kinds of different numbers, but I love the bull riding. That gives me a visual. I like metaphors. I like visuals to help. So I think that really does. So Bob, oh my gosh, we could talk for hours, but as we get ready to close out, can you tell us just one kind of strategy from the book that you want, or one thing that you want people to take away from the book after they've read the book that would be important for them to know, and then how to get the book?
Yes. Well, been so thrilled the response the book is getting. Amazing. And one of the chapters in there is how do you create a questioning culture in your organization? How do you create that questioning culture? And for me, some of the takeaways are it has to start with the leader. And it starts with the leader who's willing to ask what do you think? And what else? And what else? And what else? And then here's a simple idea. Leaders are constantly putting together meeting agendas. And here's an idea. Once you hear it, it is so simple. But, the typical meeting agenda just has a list of topics. And so we'll say that, you have a leader, you get the agenda, and one of the agenda items is national conference. Now, when you see that one of the items on our meeting coming up is national conference, Dina, do you know exactly what the leader wants to have decided by the list of that topic?
Have no idea.
You could guess.
Mm-hmm.
Should we have one? When should we have it? Where should we have it? Who should we invite to speak? How should we promote it? But you're guessing. And so I tell leaders, when you do an agenda, yes, you may start with making a list of topics, but don't pass that out. Change every topic into the question you want answered in the meeting.
Yeah,
and so back to national conference, if the question is, how do we increase attendance at our next national conference? In other words, that's the question. Well, now when you see that on the agenda, you're even beginning to think prior to the meeting. I mean, you're understanding, here's what we're wanting to talk about. It's how to increase attendance. And so you're already starting to think, how can I contribute? What ideas do I have? And you come to the meeting much more prepared, but it's clear. Well, that's just one idea on how you start creating a questioning culture. Then here's another idea. It's question storming. And question storming is well, I'll share it. It's a little different than brainstorming. But on question storming, you say, here's something we're wanting to do. It could be a goal we're wanting to reach, something we're wanting to do. But gang, here's what we're going to do. All of you, here we got flip charts or we got the whiteboard. Everybody get up and you have to write down at least 5 questions that we need to answer with regard to doing this. And so you get all those questions up there. And you also say, but do not attach your name to any of these questions. Now, maybe you can figure out who wrote what. But when you're all done, you're seeing all these questions, but you don't see a name with them. And now it's time to vote. All of you look at all the questions and go put a check mark by the 5 that you think will be most vital for us to find the answers to. And so quickly you'll have the top 5. And now you turn to the team and say, okay, here's the number 1 question. Who here would take responsibility to go find the answer and come back with the answer to that for our next meeting? How about question 2, question 3, and you assign them. But in question storming, again, you're allowing all of that input. And in this methodology, rather than doing it verbally, sometimes on a team, there are the verbal processors, but there's also the guy, the gal who they share first, and then the rest of the team is hesitant to contribute because it's like, I'm not sure that what I have to contribute will be any better, or I don't want to be embarrassed, or this or that. But here you start with everybody has to put up 5 questions before anybody hears anybody's questions. Just a few ideas on establishing a questioning culture.
I think that's awesome. And I think it's funny. I'm working with a lot of leaders right now, learning to see themselves as a coach. And that is about asking questions. And this is the biggest challenge. And I think as you talked about today, I think we're going to divide this into 2 segments because there's so much content. But I think, seeing how much, how simple it is to ask questions. What would you recommend for a leader just to get started besides reading your book? And I'm sure there's some great tips in here as well. But just, is it good to have a list of questions like, what do you think about? is it good to have some of those questions kind of in your back pocket as you are
Yes.
working with your people?
Um, I think for any leader who gets the book and reads it, a suggestion is get a note card and come up with, what do you think are your 5, 6 kind of, wow, this will be useful. And so that you can, remind yourself, actually glance at the note card prior to going into a meeting. Which questions might I want to ask today? And again, so many of them are so simple. The 4 are so simple. Here's another set, a set of 3 that I love. And these come from Navy Captain Michael D. Abrashoff. When he took over the command of the USS Benfold, one of our nation's most modern warships, morale on that ship was the lowest, and I think there's some 300 vessels in the U.S. Navy. I don't know how the Navy measures morale, but however they did, it was the lowest of all ships in the U.S. Navy. 18 months later, under his command, retested, they went literally from worst to first, highest morale of all ships in the U.S. Navy. Well, the first thing Captain Abrashoff did upon taking command is he set up 300 one-on-one meetings with the 300 sailors on that ship. The meetings lasted 15 minutes each, approximately. And in those meetings, he asked 3 questions. And you'll have these memorized upon hearing them one time.
Oh, good. I'm glad I can memorize some things with you.
He asked them, what do you like best about our ship? What do you like least? What would you change if you could? And he listened. Well, at the end of the first day, he might have only had time to meet with 10 or 15 sailors. He had a whole bunch of these 15-minute meetings to go. But there was a buzz on the ship at the end of the first day. The new captain's different. He's actually asking us for input. And as Captain Abrashoff heard the input, now he didn't promise to make every change that was suggested. But it didn't take long, and he's hearing things and thinking to himself, what? What do you mean? We're going to fix that. But guess who he gave credit to for the ideas when he began to announce changes?
The sailors, the people on his
Exactly.
Yes.
Named them by name.
Mm-hmm.
You could have been out on your first cruise, had one of these meetings, and, he stands up. Dina Williams, stand up. In a meeting with Dina, she suggested we do this. Dina, we're going to implement that. Thank you. Wow. I don't know how tall you are, Dina, but I'm guessing at that time you'd feel 10 feet tall.
Sure. Yeah. It's
And
amazing.
but those 3 questions will work anywhere. What do you like best? What do you like least? What would you change if you could? That kind of thing. And so I keep going back to some of the greatest questions really are so simple. Get some of these simple questions because they can be applied in used in so many different ways. Because the question's the same, but the topic's different, and therefore the answers will be different.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need in the center to have every time creative different questions. You can keep using the same.
That's what I think is so powerful, is that you're giving them a framework of questions to use that are powerful. And it's just learning to listen. And when you were talking about the Navy story, I think, is that the book, Turn the Ship Around? I think, is that the right one? Yes. I remember reading that. Wonderful, wonderful book. But I think about all of the leaders moving around right now, right? We've got a lot of people moving around and going on that listening tour and using some of those questions to ask everybody as they're on their listening tour. And I think a good leader in transition does take time. Could be 90 days, it could be whatever. I don't know how long the captain did that, but just taking the time to hear and say, I'm not going to make any decisions till I finish my listening tour. Yeah. And then everybody knows, oh, this is different. He's listening or she's listening. So I appreciate that.
Here's another 4.
Oh boy.
And I got these. I got these from a consultant who shared with me, he said, I'm not a subject matter expert. They don't bring me in because I have expertise in a certain area. He said, I would use the same 4 questions. If on day 1 I was consulting with the head of an airline company, day 2 the head of a pharmaceutical company, day 3 the head of a computer software company, I'd use the same 4 questions. And I said, wow, can I write them down? He said, I'll be disappointed if you don't. And he shared the 4 questions. His first question is, what's going well? His second question is, what's not? His third question is, where are you stuck? His fourth question was, what needs to change? And then once I had him written down, he said, now, Bob, don't miss that first question. He said, if I'm consulting with a new leader, haven't ever spent time with before, and he said, if I walked in at 8 a.m. and I started with question 2, what's not going well here? He said, I would not get an honest answer. He said, no one at 8 a.m. who doesn't know me wants to start with confessing, yeah, we're a bunch of losers here. And so I wouldn't get an honest answer. So he said, I start with question 1, what's going well? And he said, now he has a whole bunch of what else's, and tell me more about that. And he said, by the time we're done with question 1, they're thinking that I'm thinking that they're one of the most brilliant leaders I've ever spent time with. He said, now that sets the stage to get an honest answer on question 2. Because when I say, wow, you guys are hitting the ball out of the park, what by chance isn't going well? He said, instead of feeling like they're confessing, yeah, we're a bunch of losers, to use baseball as kind of a word picture, on question 1, they're talking about all the home runs. They're talking about all the games they won. They're talking about all the strikeouts their pitcher has. All the good things. On question 2, they're saying, oh, yeah, we've lost some games. We've had some errors. Yeah, we have some strikeouts. And you actually get the honest answer. And then he said, Bob, look at questions 3 and 4. Who figures out what needs to happen here? He said, they do. He said, I don't actually solve their problem for them. They solve it. And at the end of the day, he said, they write me that big check and they call me a brilliant consultant. But they've solved their own problem.
Yeah.
And so, Dana, I share, if you're new, let's say you're in a new role in a company, leader or otherwise, or let's just say you've been asked to be a board member. And so it's your first board meeting and you're the new board member. If at some point you say, hey, could I ask a few questions? They're going to say, of course. And Dana says, as a new board member, I just would love to know, what would you all say has been really going well here? And you say, wow, tell me more about that. Wow, this is fantastic. No wonder this company is doing so well. Second question, what would you say is not going well? Where are we stuck? What needs to change? Well, I can guarantee you by the end of that exchange, the board members that are already there are going to think, wow, I'm so glad we invited Dana to be a part of this board, or, whoever that new board member is, or that new leader walking into a company, like you say, the listening tour, and asking those kinds of things. And then, I had another takeaway as I came in contact with those 4 questions. In fact, the story, I was on Tom Ziegler's podcast, and I shared these 4 questions. And Tom said, Bob, he said, I'm a bit of a brain science nerd. I study brain science. Can I tell you why that first question is so good? I said, Tom, it's your podcast. You can say anything you want. He said, well, when the brain is processing positive things, like what's going well, positive endorphins are firing. He said, that is the perfect place in which to solve problems. He said, the leader who starts with question 2, what's not going well, and makes their staff feel like the boss thinks we're a bunch of losers, he said, that's not a good place in which to actually solve problems. And at that point, I thought, wow, I know have been so many times in my leadership, it's like, hey, there's a problem, a challenge, something on the table. We have a short amount of time. And so you jump in immediately to, hey, we got a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
And not realizing sometimes slower would be faster. Taking time to celebrate what's going well, high-fiving your staff, appreciating their input, their contribution, their hard work, applauding it before you say, here's an issue we need to solve.
I love those questions, Bob. And you spoke about these 4 questions. Gosh, it was about 2.5 years ago when we had you come and speak at our group. And I have them written right now on my bulletin board. And I ask whether it's a new client, whether it's a new employee, or whether it's a partner or a friend, and they're up there for a reason for me to remember them. So I'm so glad you brought those back, along with these amazing other questions, especially listening to the Navy captain's questions. I mean, you have just given us so much gold that I am going to divide this into 2 segments. So we will have 2 segments with Bob. So much wisdom. And I'm so glad that your coworker encouraged you to write the blog, because as we talked about earlier, 10 years of just great questions to think about and to share with others is going to leave a huge legacy. And I'm thrilled for you for doing that. And I want to thank you for doing that. And then Bob, can you also, as we close out, can you tell people how to get your book and how to find you, and if they want to get? And we'll put all the links in the podcast as well. But yeah.
Well, wherever books are sold,
okay,
you can get Leading with Questions. Certainly on Amazon, Barnes and Noble website. But just go to Amazon and type in Leading with Questions. Now, it's important. You might see all 3 editions, but look for the blue book, the blue one.
The third edition.
The 3rd edition, yes. I also have written 5 free ebooks. And of course, I would encourage all listeners, please join the leaders from 190 countries who've subscribed to my blog. Subscribing is free. Just go to leadingwithquestions.com, leadingwithquestions.com. And if you cursor down to the bottom of today's post, you'll see a place where it has a place to enter your email address and click on subscribe, and you'll instantly be subscribed. Subscribing is free, as I said. But if you go to leadingwithquestions.com, at the top, you'll see the word books. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the 5 free ebooks. And you can download one or all. They're also available in multiple languages. So if your first language is other than English, or you have colleagues, or you're working globally where you're working with people who their first language may be Spanish or Portugal or French or Polish or Albanian or Chinese. I think those are the current ones. We're adding more languages on an ongoing basis. You can pass those along. And again, everything on the blog, the ebooks are all free. And but love to have listeners join us there and become part of that group of leaders who are committed to increasing their leadership effectiveness by moving from leading by telling to leading with questions.
And thank you, Bob. Our listeners are difference makers, and they want to make an impact. And what you have given us today is going to help all of us make an impact with questions. So we want to thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing so many great tips. And we wish you the best, and excited for your book and the success it's had, and can't wait to check in with you in the future and see how things are going. So thank you.
Dana, thank you. It has been fun to be with you today.
You have been listening to Dominate Your Day podcast. If you're ready to transform your life and workplace from the inside out, go to danawilliamsco.com and set up a discovery call. We would love to connect with you and equip you with some helpful resources. Thank you for listening today, and please take a moment to subscribe to Dominate Your Day wherever you listen.